We will start with Nena Nwankanma. I'm sure I'm going to mispronounce every name, but she is the African coordinator for the World Wide Web Foundation, and she will be speaking about how open source and free software could be helpful in those areas. Nena?
Is it on?
I think no.
Oh, okay. Is it good? I didn't expect to be the first person speaking, so I was actually getting myself settled. Good morning. I don't understand why on the page it's reading special intervention, like I was going to say something extraordinary. I can assure you there isn't anything extraordinary that's going to be said by me. How much time do we have?
Let's say we have 5-6 minutes each, and then we engage in friendly conversation.
Okay.
Okay.
Quick one. I've tweeted what I'm going to say now. Basically, that the open source and open innovation story in Africa, I may not be able to speak for the whole of the Global South, has gone through 4 stages. The first stage was the what the hell? Who are these? That's the first stage. The second stage is, by the way, maybe. The third stage is Hobbs ahoy. And the last stage, the present stage is here we are. Okay, I'm going to go through all of that, 1 minute each.
Okay.
I have tweeted that I've been an open source advocate since 2000. And I'm like, hey, that's 15 bloody years. I didn't know that between 2000 and now is actually 15 years. And I think I'm a young person. But anyhow, so what has happened over 15 years? The first thing that has happened is scoping open source in the days of those ideological battles, free software and open source and all of that. And I'm this young, slim little girl in Africa, and I'm shouting myself hoarse in those days in the US, like, in Africa, we don't want that ideological debate for now. We are looking for open technologies, for innovation, and for development. And finally, round about the turn of the 20th century, we decided we are going to begin an Africa task force on open source, which finally became the Free Software and Open Source Foundation for Africa, FOSFA. So we said, open the cathedrals, let everyone come in. Free software, open source, and that's how we kicked off. And we were raising dust in those days, trying to explain to people, and they were like, who are these? You know, the long-haired folks with baggy trousers, baggy T-shirts, and low-hanging. Oh yeah, that was what we wear. I still wear my black T-shirts anyhow, and they're like, who are those people? Who are they? What the fuck? Who the hell? So we've been there, trying to raise communities and all of that. 5 years down the road, fast forward 2005, people started saying, okay, sit down, let me hear you. And we started explaining about alternative technologies. We started explaining about communities. I'm still not speaking loud enough. Okay. We started explaining building coalitions across Europe, Africa, and with certain governments even. And then we started getting space around the table to speak about open source, to speak about innovation. And by then, people were, when I go to places, I hear, by the way, there is this other solution. Then we started talking alternatives, which are not just, you're not a big company, we don't know you. So I go to places and we start hearing, oh, there is this alternative. You want to run surveys, there is an alternative. You want to do over the desktop publishing, there is an alternative. And then we started investing in trainings, in raising basically people who knew what was happening. in software and in software and programming languages. By the time we turned around 2010, we had hubs, co-creation hubs, open spaces, open hubs, all types of hubs across Africa. And now people are not just saying, by the way, I've heard of this solution. We now have young people running their own businesses on alternative models. So by this time, we're speaking about, I know a place where this can be done. So we've come to Hubs Ahoy. In almost every African city, you have a co-creation hub or what we call a co-working lab or an innovation hub. You have a place now in almost all of African countries. The Web Foundation is working with the Open Data Research Network and has launched an innovation lab in Jakarta and is launching another one in Africa in this year. So we've come to alternatives being a mainline business of itself in Africa. And now this is where we are. We've come to here we are. And what is happening is that wave of original techie people are now joining forces with the gentleman was speaking about the different trends. There is a policy trend, there's a technology trend, but there's also the rights movement that is coming into the space. So we have something like the African Declaration on Internet Rights and Freedoms, speaking up, asking for openness, asking for open technologies, asking for issues on privacy. So what we have is a convergence of technology people making inroads, of business using alternatives and organizing themselves in communities, and policy realizing that there is need for openness in technology and the rights movement. So we're coming to a convergence of a lot of people asking for openness. And this is, for me, mostly evident in the innovation labs that we're running across many places in Africa. These have become centers of innovation. They've become business points. They've become advocacy centers, and they've become policy support centers that we didn't even believe there were. So these days, when you're looking for someone who is good in ICT policy, you probably find a person in a co-creation hub.
Okay, thank you.
And so we see that it's the coming together on all of that, and I'm happy to speak more on any of those.
Okay, we will come
I'll
back.
beat you to your own time.
Okay, I will come back together to talk about that. Next, I have on my right to Georg Greve. He is the founder and former president of the Free Software Foundation in Europe. He's now the CEO of, if I'm not mistaken, of Colab. And he has extensive experience as lecturer in free software and open software. So please, you have the floor.
Which one do I take? This one?
Yes.
All right, cool. Thank you. Good morning, I guess it still is. It's a pleasure to be here. And I, if I understand correctly, am to give you a little bit of an insight into the free software perspective on business, or how to build a sustainable business on top of free software. And to me, the only surprise in all of this is really that this is still being discussed. Because I've been involved in this debate for a while. I think I started using and actually writing free software in the early 90s, became fairly involved in the political side of things towards the end of the 90s. And back then, yes, I could understand that people didn't quite understand how free software would actually enable economy and make it sustainable. By today, I think by all intents and purposes, free software, or if you want to call it open source, but it has become mainstream. I mean, it's hard to be more mainstream than it is today. We have gigantic corporations that would not have been possible without it. Google, Facebook, several others. IBM has invested billions into it, literally, and has made lots of money from it. It's very clear that this is by now a gigantic global industry. And the reason for that is very simple. Free software ultimately is about the freedom to build, to innovate, and also, of course, to then use. And I mean, use means use for commercial purposes as well, right? That means, in fact, if I were to write a software license that would prohibit commercial use, that license would not qualify as a free software license. It's about economic freedom. It always has been, along with all the other values that are being discussed. Now, how does this work? It's surprisingly traditional. It's actually not rocket science. If you look at the revenue models of virtually all the proprietary businesses out there, you will see that software licensing plays a certain role. However, it's not the license revenue that really is the main motivator for almost all those proprietary businesses out there. There are some exceptions, but red herrings exist in almost any field. It's the support chain, it's the services, it's the training, it's everything on top of the software. The software itself is a tool towards providing a value, which ultimately is solving a problem for you. I mean, software is a functional thing, right? Its value derives from solving a problem. If it solves that problem well, then that's good for you, and that is valuable to you, and therefore you are willing to pay for it. That's really what it boils down to. Now, the proprietary model takes the approach that this particular value can only ever be generated by a single party, which is inherently always a monopoly, because only one party has that right to provide you the full range of services. Partner ecosystems are trying to emulate a little bit of competition on top of that and give a thin veneer of apparent competition. But this is really fighting just for scraps. There's a lot of partner ecosystems out there that are essentially fighting each other more than anything else over the scraps of the table from the monopolist. Free software is fundamentally different. Free software is about enabling everyone to provide that service, which is why on any given technology, you can have any number of companies providing professional service. And their differentiator is not in whether or not they are capable of locking you legally into a monopoly. Their differentiator is whether they can provide you a service for a price that makes sense. And every single successful free software business has understood this and is essentially building itself around that approach. That starts from the distribution, so the operating system level, where they take the operating system components and then provide those as a packaged bundle. There's nothing in there that you couldn't do yourself, right? If you have the inclination and the skills, which you can learn, I mean, all of this is freely learnable. There's no limits to learning. You can learn this yourself, you can do this yourself, you can put it together yourself, you can run this yourself. You can do all that. You have that freedom, and I believe it is imperative that you do. However, it's not perhaps very efficient for you to do that. Maybe that is not what you are very good at, maybe that is not what you want to do, maybe the time you just simply don't have. So there is parties that provide that service to you and provide you with that service in terms of, here is a prepackaged set that works on your machine that you have, your laptop, whatever you're running, and that is what you can use. And this goes up the stack as well. That's also what my own business does. I mean, we develop ourselves as well and contribute upstream into the various free software projects, but we provide a packaged version of a set of components that together fulfill a certain need. And we do that in a way that it is easy for people to take it up, and we provide it with a long-lasting support guarantee, so you know that when 3 years down the road you're hitting a problem, someone is there to fix it for you. You get that level of assurance, which in the professional world you want. So there's really nothing rocket sciencey about this, I'm afraid. I mean, I have no secrets to divulge. It is surprisingly trivial on a fundamental level. It's the same thing that essentially drives all of economy. If you provide an actual value to someone, there's a market. And the market that is around free software is huge. And it's growing. I would even say on the trajectory we are right now, it's about to become dominant, and I'm very much looking forward to that.
Yeah, and thank you. And the open hardware hasn't even exploded completely yet, so I think we will be looking at more open movement in the near future. Thank you very much. We will come back to that later. Next, my good friend Mario Pena. He's the Chief Business Development Officer and Community Manager at Safe Creative. It's an online copyright repository, so he will be sharing his thoughts on business models for open and free software. Mario?
Well, thank you very much, and thank you for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be here in this astonishing venue. I'm impressed by this building. It couldn't be the other way around. As Pedro introduced me, I'm working in a copyright registry service, which is a system where anybody can generate authorship evidence. It's agnostic, meaning that anybody can register and claim all rights or Creative Commons or whatever. We have over 156,000 creators. Many of them are programmers, and of course we have open source programmers. I myself have been in touch, very much in touch, in contact with some of the leading minds of the open source movement. I am myself a copyright activist, so to say, so I have my own personal views about this, but I want to share not only my views, but also give a little bit of voice to those people I've been talking through these years about open source and their concerns. And also the appreciations from somebody who is outside of the programming, although I'm a technician. But well, here are a few points I want to highlight. Many has already been said, but I'm going to repeat a little bit about them. First one is that I believe there is a lot of misconceptions about open software, and I mean in the general public. We have to take our good old beer to explain what free beer means, what free service is, what open is, what libre is. We even take the Spanish word to explain what is open source, what is open software. Having to explain in different ways with these examples, because the terms are confusing because they mean different things in different languages in different countries. And this misunderstanding goes all the way from the younger people, even to programmers that we know of, and more importantly to our public representatives. We'll go back to this in a moment. So I think one of the challenges is to be able to explain to the general public so that it permeates to all the actors involved what open source is, what it means. And here it comes when we talk about business models themselves. When you explain somebody what he already said about, it's not rocket science. It's quite clear once you put some examples of what open source means and in the meaning of what business models are being constructed above them. Then you find out that people see the light and start to understand that these really are very important businesses. So only knowing that's very important. Also, I want to highlight that there are some, like any human endeavor, there are lights and shadows in the open source movement, and it's something that we can talk, especially when we deal with business models. We have very good ideas we didn't know of. Like, for instance, I just want to put an example, which is one of my hobbies, these drones, the drones that fly that you can get. And I'm thinking of the one I want to buy someday, which is the Parrot drone. And it was very interesting to find out that the software they use to fly those devices is open source. So this means that once you get this device that brings you a hobby to your house, you are going to be able to, even in the worst case, to adapt the code by yourself if you need to. So this is something, an added value to a business that relies on building hardware, which is the parrot drones. And there comes one of the big examples of one of the biggest, if not the biggest, business model built around open software, at least in the first place, which are the Android operating system. There we have many of us Android devices in our houses, and it was built by Google using the open source software, but it has been the same company is locking it into proprietary software by some applications. They build their own. They are changing to ensure that there are no competitors appealing enough as to change the game, because they are competing with operating system like iOS from Mac. And even Google has go to create the Open Handset Alliance with chilling effects. We talked about chilling effects, and that's also interesting to know of, that there are shadows at least. But when we put examples about the internet servers with the Apache and the NASA, the space agency, choosing Linux for the International Space Station, and the defense departments using open software, that's very revealing of the importance of it, because it's not only about taking the easiest or the cheapest solution, but also the most robust of them.
Yeah. Thank you.
I'm not depending. I have 2 points more.
Okay.
It's already been said about the software patents. It's important to highlight this, because this is a risk a risk for open businesses that is going on right now, especially in Spain. The last proposal is going to open the possibility of making software patents in Spain. So this is very important to highlight. But more than that, when we talk about open software, it seems we are talking about technology geeks, people who really are interested in these fields. But it's more about democracy. It's more about empower people to control the code and not the other way around. So it's a matter of transparency, which governments and public representatives should really take care of, especially in these moments. And the last one point I want to highlight is that we keep this mantra of keeping to grow all the time, grow the economy should grow, but we live in a planet with limited resources. So the real value is what we do with our time. So to reinvent the wheel is futile sometimes. So we have to take care of these business models, not only because it's good for the countries to create qualified jobs, not to depend on certain companies that can disappear anytime, but also to keep this, to change this model of speculation that has driven us to the situation we live in many countries, to recycle knowledge, to promote software, and to preserve our precious unlimited resources. Thank you.
Thank you, Mario. And last but not least, Giuseppe Macciotti. He's assistant professor of Trinity College in Dublin. He's also an author and the founder of Mediautis, a legal advisory consultancy for creative content. Giuseppe, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much to the organizers for the invitation first, and also for having allowed me to participate in this panel discussion that I find extremely interesting. A few remarks. We heard a lot about the obstacles that intellectual property raises to open innovation. If I can summarize what my feelings have been about, is that in the US we have definitely a much bigger problem with software patents, a problem that we tend not to have in the same dimension in Europe. Whereas in Europe we do have a problem with copyright, and all the debate that was developed in the previous panel with regard to copyright exceptions is justified by the restrictive force that copyright has in Europe, but because of the inability of Europe to come together and to widely accept a certain approach and develop a certain approach. We discussed with Giulia Reda and with other MEPs and other academics and other stakeholders in Brussels this a few weeks ago. Now it's very much reform time for copyright, and I see that a reform will be certainly be proposed by the Commission, and then it will be up to the political debate to see what the best amendments to the existing directives will have to be. We shouldn't forget that the influence of lobbying in Brussels is huge on all sides. Some years ago it was very easy to criticize the creative industry's lobbying. These days the lobbying comes from every single sector, and copyright is a sector where telecoms are lobbying hard, even though they like keeping a low profile. The technology companies are lobbying very, very high, and their force is huge in comparison to the creative industries. I share with the American keynote speaker the idea that trade organization, when it comes to creative works like the movie industry, the recording industry, they have this institutional mission, but we shouldn't expect politicians to buy their arguments acritically, right? So just to try to be consistent with the kind of assignment I've been given. I completely agree with the opinion of the Free Software Foundation representative that free software and has never been as successful commercially as it is now, and it has never been as mainstream and as lucrative in terms of opportunities that have been given not only to small startups but also to gigantic companies that have developed services and ways to use knowledge that is in principle available to anyone without relying on intellectual property. This clearly shows that innovation can be developed without intellectual property protection. At the same time, what we need, in my view, and it's something which is increasingly difficult to achieve at international, at European level, for instance, is to define which areas should be targeted by intellectual property protection in the traditional way. Also, with regard to which kind of works, because if we look, for instance, now free software has been examined and has been covered very well, but whenever we hear about the similarities between the free software, the open source licenses with regard to software, and the open content licenses with regard to non-software content. So let's take as an example Creative Commons. Creative Commons has also been very successful to such an extent that governments and public institutions are widely relying on Creative Commons in order to make it sure that the result of their work, or also their template licenses, can be freely used with no restriction. And also in the domain of collaborative creations, Creative Commons is by far also the most widely used license in the world. And Creative Commons developed in spite of the very, very strong copyright legislation in favor of the proprietary model.
Yeah, maybe even as a response.
Yeah, but at the same time, I think that if copyright had not been so restrictive and protective, probably this movement would not have started with such a strong force and energy. So the advocates of not all the advocates of intellectual property rights, so the ones that still think that all intellectual property can play a role, regard the Creative Commons as a, as a subversive or, something negative. No, they say, if we didn't have such a system, probably these movements would never have started, and this clarification of what should be protected, what should not be protected, would not have been achieved through non-legal means. Because at the end, all what we have is something which is achieved through, these licenses, which are, a sort of manifesto, a standard also for the average people to understand that the authors of that knowledge, of that content, do not expect any financial reward for that. They want to share. I have a problem with, the traditional creativity. When we speak about, things that probably will continue to be enjoyed as they are. We can't predict how, the film industry, the filmmaking will evolve. There are a lot of, the keynote speaker mentioned a lot of examples of innovative creations that widely rely on taking pre-existing works and remix them, that at the moment is widely infringing. In Europe, all the examples you made, for instance, in the US, you might have, examples of substantive taking, like in the Pretty Woman case that the the Supreme Court in the U.S. qualified as a parody, which escaped the restrictions of copyright. In Europe, all the examples you made would be evident violations of copyright. But the same digitization of works that Google did when starting the Google Books project with regard to copyright books, they did the whole thing in the U.S. relying on fair use, and also the settlement, the judgment on the suit that was brought by 8,000 authors against Google. Again, Google prevailed, and the judge refused the settlement, saying the settlement is not acceptable. But then at the end, they found that all the digitization activities that Google did with regard to copyright works taken from the catalogs of a few U.S. libraries was fair. But that in Europe, fair use in Europe would not have been legal. So in this respect, Europe has to clarify certain things. Europe has to clarify, and this is an historical opportunity, what kind of acts are not supposed to be covered by copyright, because at the end, that's not the mission of copyright. That's not the real purpose of copyright. In Europe, it's going to be very difficult, because as everyone knows, the lobbying activity of trade organizations is very pervasive, and the problem is that we do not have sufficiently prepared politicians. That's a problem.
That's a tough one. That's a tough one.
Yeah.
I think I'm going to thank you, Giuseppe. I think I'm going to open the floor to questions to our four panelists about free and open software business models. So maybe even to our online assistants. Do we have any questions on the floor?
I get the feeling that in the software field, to the people who are actually producing software, the choice whether they make something open source or not is much more conscious than the choice in other IP fields. That especially when it comes to artistic works, we have the big problem that even though Creative Commons exists as a possibility to deal with some of the problems with the fact that copyright is there by default, a lot of people who are, for example, putting their holiday pictures on the internet are never confronted with the conscious decision whether or not they want something to be exploited commercially, whether they want to claim their copyright in the future. So since we are bound by international treaties who say that a mandatory registration of copyright is not a possibility, I'm wondering whether there's something we can learn, practices from the software field to make this choice more conscious, and that could also be applied to other fields of IP.
Joe, who would like to take that? Yeah. Maybe both?
Let me speak for the Web Foundation. When you speak to Tim Berners-Lee about web and internet, the basic nature of the web is to share. is interactivity. And this is what I tell people everywhere. If you want to be private, don't go online. That's the best way. Don't connect, be yourself, be happy. But the genetic formula of the internet is to share. So if you post a tweet, once it appears on my timeline, it's mine now. I can share it. So anywhere there's a share button, there's a forward, there is whatever, then it. So I think that consciousness is what people need to have. That if it's online, it's already liable to sharing. Yeah. That's just my point.
Go.
Yeah, I agree with that, and I also think it's an excellent question.
Yeah.
I think it's true. There is clearly more awareness among the software developers about what license they choose and why. It's perhaps not as deep as one would want sometimes. Some of the finer implications are often lost, but yes, there is more awareness. I think it also has to do with the fact that software development is a lot closer to professional life for most people than your vacation pictures. So I'm not sure I have a good answer as to how we can use the lessons learned there and translate them over so easily, because people think about these things in very different mental boxes, is my experience. I mean, the human brain seems to segment these things differently. So making the concept applied in one box leap over to the other sometimes is not so easy. I'm not certain that we can actually find an answer to that question, to be honest. I mean, I don't know of a way.
Mario would like to explain.
I also don't have an answer, but I have some experience because we are in touch with so many thousand creators that actually most of them generate contents, not software. So but in our company we have to be very neutral. I mean, we don't push them to choose either copyright or copyleft or Creative Commons or GNU, whatever. So we suppose they know what they want to, but we realize that they don't know about it. From the conversations that we have, most of the people who share the contents, we ask them some questions. What do you want your work to happen with? What kind of uses do you think would be great or not? Just think about it. And they used to answer with some questions. I don't mind if they share my content unless they try to make some profit. The moment they want to take some profit, then so it seems that the commercial use is something that has been pointed out by Darren. The commercial use is one of the main concerns. But the funny thing is, but are you going to make any commercial use of your own work? In the case of the pictures, they say, well, actually, I don't think I'm going to make any money. So it's like a Socratic approach. You start making questions to them, and you let them answer by themselves. And after a conversation, they realize that we have to send them to Creative Commons licensing explanation, so they understand that they have the way to do it. But it's more about we need to have time to make these questions to the people so they can question themselves what they want to do. And it's no easy task because we have, as I said, 156,000 creators and 156 different opinions on copyright issues. And it's amazing. And there is a lot of not understanding about copyright. That's absolutely amazing. People who say, I'm posting something online, then it's public for everybody. Is that right? And I said, well, actually, it's not. But they don't know the basics. But even professional creators, they don't even know the basics. It's very hard to explain because when we go to an event to talk about copyright issues, people look bored at the beginning. Then it's very interesting because it's funny. It's amazing the things that you can, But people are a little bit like scared about it. But people want to use contents they find in the internet. This is one of the questions that I ask people. Wouldn't you like to not to have any problem using the content of somebody else? only crediting the person? Wouldn't that be great? Wouldn't like you to do the same thing for the people?
Yes.
That's a good question.
Okay. We have probably another good question from over there.
Trying to be not so Eurocentric. Going back to Africa, I guess my question goes to Nena. What, in your opinion, the future holds for a free and open software for Africa? Do you think, what are the prospects? Do you think those alternative approaches would help catapult countries out of poverty?
I'm also asking myself that question. So that makes two of us. There is a huge realization of opportunities, but then I didn't talk about the future. I stopped at here we are, in which there's a convergence. Now, what happens with convergence is that it creates a groundswell of energy, and industry interests that may be threatened are not going to sit and take it easy. So I think that in the next 4 or 5 years, we'll be having a lot of court cases coming up, because now it's threatening interests. That's one thing I see. But I also see a lot of creativity and wealth creation, especially. But it's what the left and the right. So there will be opportunities. There will be more creativity because of convergent efforts. But then there will be more challenges, because now 10 years ago, the open source creators were not challenging anyone's interest, huge economic interest. But when that becomes a reality, then the judges are going to have more work to do.
We have another question.
As Mr. Graves said, there is serious business to be made with open source software. Is it the same with open content licensing? Is it possible to create serious business on open content licensing, such as Creative Commons, for instance?
You're jumping into the afternoon. That's precisely the question that I think the afternoon is supposed to look at. But the answer is there may be, but I think some answers may likely be different.
Mario, would you like to join me?
Yeah. That's I think is the big challenge of open contents, so to say, because there are specific experiments that are working, but I don't think there is a general well, there are examples of open contents creating something like Wikipedia, for instance, which is an amazing project, and it's not the only one. But a lot of people ask us about business models for open contents, and it's really hard to explain. The first thing is we need to differentiate the tool to create the content, which can be open software or private software, that has a professional approach, as he already said. It's a tool to create something. You need to create that content. You need to create an outcome. But once you have the outcome, that's, so to say, the final result. What happens with that final result? Are you going to share it for free? Are you going to try to make money out of it? That you make it open means that you cannot make money out of it, that you cannot take advantage of the ecosystem of others maybe making money out of your content. So those are all very good questions, and I think we live in a moment in which everything is going to change. Everything is digital, everything goes through software, and that's very important on the perspective of society and freedoms, and knowing what your content is doing with your data, like the Snowden's revelation told us. So there's a lot of concern about the tools we use to create things. But once the things are created, then we need to figure out systems that could provide value, but value in a general sense, not only money, but value. Value is very important. It's different from price sometimes.
Giuseppe would like to answer as well.
Yeah, I think that with regard to open content, even though content might not be licensed under Creative Commons or under another open content license, what social media platforms already do with user-generated content is a huge amount of money already. So in my experience, I mean, I'm a musician as well. I have lots of friends who are musicians but play niche music, not mainstream music, jazz, for instance. Not many of these authors understand the value of their content, because in their historical battle with intermediaries like record producers, their conclusion after many years of practice and business is, copyright has not helped me in the sense that I've not gained very much money, if any, from the intermediary. So for me, it's okay to give my content for free and to use this social media platform as exposure to us, as windows for my activities. But they rarely look at the licenses that they have to grant to this social media operator. Some time ago there was like a fuss with regard to the property over pictures published on Instagram, for instance. No, there was a sort of users / creators, the new creators, let's say the amateur creators that do not expect at least widely a financial reward for their creations, do not understand exactly the licenses through which they are transferring their content to these operators. Right?
Actually, that's a very, very important point. Just if I might, I'm going to plug one project, which is Terms of Services Didn't Read.
Yeah, exactly.
It's an excellent project that initiated in France. It's essentially meant to translate the legalese, which is deliberately obfuscated, right? It's so dull, even lawyers' brains hurt reading it. It's impossible. Right. And so what they do is they grade it. They tell you what are the good and the bad points about it in a way that you understand as a non-legal person, and give it an overall grade, and that way you know whether or not or how good these terms of services are for you as a user. So Terms of Services Didn't Read. Have a look at that.
But that's also, I completely agree with you, but that's also negative for potential business developments, because these days, even due to technological improvements, there are pictures on these social media platforms that might be of interest for commercial exploiters, which means that it's very difficult if you want to take a picture from Instagram, from Flickr, and to make a commercial use of that picture in a newspaper, in advertisements, and so forth. It's not very clear how this kind of exploitation, which is could be beneficial for the social media platform, could be beneficial for the photographer. I mean, at the end, the idea of granting access for free, but then developing sub-markets which can, give some financial reward, which is never bad in my view when it is fair.
Yeah.
So,
Nena would like
maybe a quick one, not on money but on values, because I want to pick from that. I don't know if anyone has seen a Coca-Cola of all people. That's taking off where you remove the name of the Coca-Cola and put your name on it. Yeah. It's all over Africa. God bless whoever got that idea. Because I don't drink soft drinks, but for once, I really want one. I want one, and they are making money out of this. And what's happening? You just switch the name Coca-Cola to your own name. And so it's raving. I went to Nigeria, and Nigerians are crazy, and people are buying their own selves. So I think that's the new trend of user creator for the business owner. So all that Coca-Cola of all people, that's why I'm not happy about it, is sitting back, asking you to put in your name, get it printed, and come and pay for the drink and pick it up. Yeah. And folks are getting married, drinking only Coca-Cola on their wedding because it's got the name of, I don't know, Giuseppe and Nena. you know, where it has Coca-Cola, it's going to be Giuseppe and then you're drinking it on our wedding. We get the value, they get the money, and we are the creators. So, I mean,
it's the same with what happens with social media is more or less the same to a certain extent. I mean, user-generated content these days is not only the content, it's also data. If you look at content also from a data perspective, these platforms would not exist without these generous contributions from users. So.
We have one last question because we are running out of time. Here, from Julia.
It just occurred to me, isn't it perhaps the difference between software and other kinds of media that are shared on the internet, that the platforms for sharing these works in the software field are also open source software. So basically the people who are building the platforms for sharing open source are aware of these issues, and thereby I think GitHub, for example, has a free license as a default or even mandatory, I'm not sure. So basically, shouldn't we encourage the free software community to build more platforms for the sharing of creative works in which they make Creative Commons the default?
That's a good one, yes.
Good question. I think it would definitely be useful. I think some of these initiatives are already happening, actually. I know of the Creative Commons machinery projects and things like that, where they try to provide ways to make the metadata shareable and actually be able to understand what can map to what. So I have an easier way of understanding what I can do or cannot do. But the biggest challenge to me is actually not technical in this realm. The biggest challenge to me is to change the human awareness and mind, what we Germans call Aufklärung. That's always been the hardest job. Technical problems we can solve very fast. They're never the problem. No matter what you look, never the technical problem. It's the humans. It's helping human understanding to evolve. That's the challenge. There is no technical solution to that either. Technology can only help. And that's a little bit where I'm always finding myself at a loss, because I don't see easy answers other than keeping to teach. What you do with asking questions to make people aware and actually start asking questions, I think is a very good approach. People should have to ask those questions more often. We need to teach this probably earlier, probably in schools, so people start to be aware of some of these questions as early on as possible, so they know what it means when I put that picture up. They know that this can be used for commercial purposes, and I'm okay with that if I put it under this license. Once they understand the implications, they can make informed choices. Our problem is right now, I think, that for the vast majority of people, they do not understand the implications.
The mic.
Speak up.
No, someone is listening to you from Africa.
Can we get the mic to Patrick, please? Last intervention.
The common interpretation for that is reconnaissance, and so it's discovery, and it's doing by learning, not just by education, but by actually getting out there and doing things. Now, in the United States, there's an expression often used called do-lal, which is do a little, learn a lot. What we find in a lot of government initiatives is they like to talk about things, but they don't do anything, so they don't learn anything. Because they go to plan it all in advance, and words like, well, I give an example. We have another expression, which is no military plan survives the first engagement with the enemy. So the point I'm making here is that Darwin and evolution is right in this. So we are constantly going to be dealing with the unknown. And for that reason, it's really important to learn by doing. So I think Aufklärung was a really good point, and this is a very cultural thing. If we don't encourage our children and indeed others, decision makers, to take risks with the expectation of failure, this is entrepreneurialism as well, then we will not be successful in changing these behaviors.
Yep. Although just very briefly, the Deutsche Aufklärung, die Aufklärung, it translates to the Enlightenment, as in the movement to enlighten human beings through knowledge and understanding, right? So it's something of building fundamental human knowledge patterns and bringing us into a shape that we can actually understand our surroundings and make informed choices.
Can I just add one thing? I was 7 good years the chair of FOSFA. And Church, one of the enlightening that I had to do was enlighten tech guys that business works differently. That writing software is not enough. Because he's sitting in his corner, he's drinking beer and coffee, and he's compiling, and he's thinking that everybody thinks like him. When you ask him to cut his hair, put on some smart suit, and go and market his product, he's like, those guys should know it's good. No, it's not good. Business moves in a different way from technology. And that convergence of business and technology, we haven't got there yet. Yeah?
Okay, thank you very much. I would ask you to join me in thanking our 4 panelists. Thank you very much.